welcome to our webinar today. I hope you can clearly hear me. Please let me know if there are any issues with the sound. We are very happy to have everyone join us today. This webinar is special and talking about Ohio. Ohio has rapidly emerged as a leading innovation hub in the United States, attracting global businesses and startups looking for strategic growth opportunities. With a robust infrastructure, access to top-tier talent, and strong public-private collaborations, Ohio offers a compelling value proposition for international expansions. So whether you're joining us today as an entrepreneur who's looking to enter a new market, or as an investor looking for growth opportunities for your portfolio company and expansions, we are here today to explore how Ohio has been positioned as one of the leading innovation hubs in the United States with Chris Berry, President and CEO of OhioX. Chris, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. And good morning to you. I know it's very early your time.
Well, thanks for having me. I know it's the evening for you all, and yeah, it's not too early anymore. So this is a perfect time for me to join. And again, I'm just really grateful that everyone took the time to be part of this.
That's amazing. We're so happy to have you. Chris, let's start by having a bit, tell us more about your background. What do you do? What does the company do? A bit on the background.
Sure. So I run OhioX. We're a statewide nonprofit technology association. So think of it like a technology chamber of commerce for our state. And so we work with companies of all shapes and sizes and organizations of all shapes and sizes. Like most trade associations and organizations, we're a member-driven and a member-based one. And so our members are companies and organizations, again, of all shapes and sizes. So we have everything from startups to Fortune 500 companies and everything in between. So small businesses, we have universities, research organizations, other nonprofits that are innovation focused. And our work is about connecting, promoting, and advocating for the growth of Ohio's tech sector. And so as you were teeing us up a second ago, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of momentum that's happening in our state. And it's a really fun time to be getting to do this with a lot of special people and some really great companies and organizations.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Okay, let's start with why Ohio. Let's say what sets Ohio apart from the rest of the states for international expansion?
Sure, great question, and one that we think a lot about, and we're seeing more and more companies that are deciding to expand from various parts of the U.S. or across the world into our state, especially over the last few years. The biggest, one I would say is, the institutions we have. There's just incredible larger companies that have been here for a very long time. There's also universities and research organizations. So our state, for instance, and I guess to back it up a little bit of Ohio as a state, we're not the first place we know that when people think of tech and innovation or startups or high growth tech companies, that's typically California and San Francisco or Boston, Massachusetts in the biotech space. But we're seeing more of that opportunity come to our part of the country. Ohio is located east of Chicago, but west of New York City and the Eastern Seaboard. And so geographically, we're in this really special location where we're in the Eastern time zone. So we share the same time as Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. But we're about as far west as you can get before you go into the Central time zone. In our state, you are within about a one-day drive for about 60% of the U.S. population. And as you look at, our state's economy, it's the seventh largest in the U.S., but if we were a country, it would be 21st largest in the world. And so we're kind of a large state in our country. And there's a lot of businesses here. The other thing that I would say that makes Ohio unique is the cities. We have a lot of them, a lot of larger cities. So for instance, if you've been to Chicago or if you've been to New York, most states in the US have kind of one really big city. So it's like New York, Chicago, Illinois, Atlanta, Georgia, where everything's in kind of one location. Ohio is a bit different, and we're more like a California or a Texas, where, in California, you have San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, Sacramento, a lot of kind of vibrant, populous regions. That's a bit of how Ohio is too. And so we have what we call in Ohio the three C's: Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. They're all about an hour and a half, 2 hours apart from each other if you're kind of connecting it. So you can drive, spend the whole day going to the different cities. And then we have a lot of other cities like Dayton and Akron, Canton, Toledo, Youngstown, etc., that are also very quite sizable, and they have industries, they have universities, they have great hospital systems. And so the difference is we're just a little more spread out, which can be challenging because I'm from one part of the state, which is 2 hours away. I have family in another part of the state, which is a couple hours away. But at the end of the day, you're able to open up real market opportunities in multiple cities, but within one geographic region and within
Yeah.
one short drive. And so that's a really big piece, I think, our geography that you really can't, kind of replicate, or it'd be really tough to, but it is something that really sets us apart. And I think the access to customers, whether you're in financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, etc., you're going to have access to a lot of those businesses because of our geographic location.
Yeah, the bigger the state is, the bigger the opportunities are, as you
Mhm.
said, on the customer side, the testing side, on different angles. And it's very interesting to know that. So beyond the Intel Semiconductor Campus and the Cleveland Clinic Innovation Hub, what
Mhm.
other large-scale initiatives are there that are shaping the Ohio business landscape?
Sure, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Intel. That's gotten everyone excited over the past few years and doing semiconductors here. A massive one that was just announced last month is Anduril, a defense tech startup that makes drones and flying robots essentially. They decided they're California-based company, and they're going to open up an Ohio plant, a manufacturing center here. And so that's going to be probably the largest economic development investment in our state's history, about 4,000 jobs to create that will be created in Central Ohio. And so that's a new one. That's also quite exciting because it's still a startup. They're very much moving fast and doing things very innovative. And that really excites people because it's something that our state has been working really hard to attract more startups, to help more Ohio-born startups grow, but also to get ones that are maybe headquartered in California to open up a major operation, in this case, a major manufacturing facility. And so that is a huge one that has people really, really excited. And when you think of robotics, when you think of drones, that really ties in well to our state's legacy in terms of manufacturing and advanced manufacturing as we look at the future of it. And so it's taking something that our state has done really, really well for a long time, build and make things, and it's doing it in kind of a new, innovative way that is leading in a new space for our state, building these things. And so Anduril is a big one. You mentioned the Cleveland Innovation District. They're doing fantastic work in healthcare and life sciences, anchored by groups like the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals. And so something like the Cleveland Clinic, it's an Ohio hospital system, but people across the world know it, and people come to Ohio for healthcare. But that innovation district is interesting because they're also doing similar work. As I was talking about the different cities we have, but they're also building an innovation district in Columbus, and there's one being built in Cincinnati. And so it's
Mhm.
created this what they call the Ohio Discovery Corridor, and I'll drop it in the chat for everyone to check out at your convenience. But the thesis is it's taking, the strength of our state, which in a lot of ways is healthcare,
Mhm.
universities, higher education, research institutions, and doubling and tripling down through investment, collaboration, strategic partnerships. And so that Cleveland Innovation District by its own is impressive and exciting, but there's one happening unique to Columbus in the similar spirit, one happening unique to Cincinnati in the similar spirit. And so going again, connecting these dots, if you can go to all three and open up, healthcare, life sciences opportunities for your company, your investments, it really kind of creates a world of opportunity by connecting all of these pieces that historically have been doing great work, but kind of doing it in their pocket of the state. So we're really seeing, true statewide collaboration that opens up a lot more collaboration and partnership opportunity.
That's amazing. That's very great. Healthcare, I mean, the healthcare industry, it has a lot of gaps and a lot of problems. One of the top industries where it has a lot of issues. Corporates face a lot of problems and they have challenges, and there's a huge opportunity for this space. So this is one of the industries with the biggest opportunities worldwide. What other industries that are fast growing in Ohio, aside from the healthcare, from your point of view, from what you see around?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And when you think of Ohio, oftentimes healthcare does the lead. But we really have deep expertise in a handful of others too. Insurance, financial services, manufacturing are big, and agriculture. Those are a handful and that's not to say that there aren't, terrific startups doing things in other spaces. But largely, if we look at Ohio's, kind of our geographic map of the state, and you kind of plug where there's a lot of healthcare, where there's a lot of insurance, a lot of financial service, a lot of manufacturing, you're going to see dots all across the state. Doesn't matter what part of the state you're in. On top of that, there's things like consumer goods, CPGs, because in Cincinnati, that's the home of Procter and Gamble, a global company that's selling their goods all across the world. Also, Kroger, one of the biggest supermarket chains in the United States. And so there's a lot of consumer goods in a pocket in Cincinnati because that's just where these companies have been headquartered and operating for a very long time. But looking at those kind of similar ones of the financial services, the insurance, the manufacturing, the agriculture, there's a lot of banking, for instance, in our state. Everything from Ohio headquartered banks like Fifth Third in Cincinnati, Huntington Bank, Columbus, Key Bank in Cleveland, but also JP Morgan Chase. They have one of their largest outside of New York City. I think it's probably the largest outside of New York, hubs where they do a ton of technology. They have a lot of bankers, a lot of office workers, literally thousands. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, was just in Columbus visiting them, and because of the amount of folks that they have working here. And so that's an example. Wells Fargo, another large American bank, they've built a technology center in Columbus too. And so we're kind of seeing these things where we have these really strong workforces, and workforce plays a big role in all of this, where there'll be a lot of workers in banking, financial services, and then we'll see add-ons and follow-ons coming in, like the Wells Fargo Technology Center, or startups. There's one startup called Upstart, which was headquartered in San Francisco. They decided to come out to Ohio, basically build their second headquarters while they were still a startup because of the talent base, also being closer to customers. It gave them kind of a Midwest, Eastern Seaboard market opportunity where they weren't 3 hours behind customers on the eastern side of the United States. They've since IPO'd. Now they're a publicly traded company, but there's hundreds upon hundreds of Ohioans that are working at that company that's San Francisco headquartered, but it's a big operation in Central Ohio, in the Columbus area. And then in terms of advanced manufacturing, again, the Intels, the Andurils, Honda and LG, they have a big electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant, about $4 billion that's being built in our state. Ford has an EV plant that's being built in northeastern Ohio near Cleveland. So we're seeing a lot of money, a lot of investment, billions of dollars in some cases, because of this history tradition that our state has in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing as well. So we have the history, the tradition, the workforce for it. And so you're seeing some of these big companies, again, a Honda, it's operated, a Japanese company has operated in Ohio for many, many years, but they're still choosing to make investments and pumping in billions of dollars because they've, found Ohio as a welcoming state, and one that they can really do well with their business. Agriculture, a lot of our state is very ag focused. We grow the food that people eat. things like corn and soybeans, those types of things. And so we're starting to see some more technology around, those industries, which are more traditional. But certainly, if you're near the customers, if you're near where the food's getting produced, there's a lot of opportunities. And then insurance, a bit like financial services too. We have a lot of big insurance companies in our state. Columbus specifically has built out a really impressive insurtech hub that's been very organic and very natural because a lot of people were working at these insurance companies. They had ideas on something that they could help innovate and do a bit better. And so we've seen a number of successful startups in the insurtech space that have been built in Columbus because, again, of that natural base of existing companies, but then also the existing workforce. And so those are a few of the kind of the bigger industries that are in our state. Again, there's certainly more, but those are probably the headliners.
That's amazing. Thank you for giving us an full overview on the Ohio ecosystem and what's happening. This is a full overview. Let's dive deep into the specifics, some specifics. So let's talk about the funding, for example, the
Mhm.
access to funding and the government incentives. What funding opportunities, grants, state-backed programs, or venture funding that are, available for startups looking to expand in Ohio from different
Sure.
countries?
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing to lead off with is historically, and it certainly hasn't been corrected, and there's a lot of good, smart people that are working hard to change this. But historically, it is tough for venture fundraising in places. Basically, if you don't live in San Francisco or Boston or in New York, it can be tough historically to get venture dollars. And that's slowly starting to change. I think COVID, because so many tech companies went virtual, went remote, they weren't necessarily working in, one specific city, or maybe they're splitting times. And so, something like venture dollars for startups is an area that, again, there's been a lot of progress and there's still more work to happen. But there's a lot of great groups that are focused on that. And so our state has a number of venture investors, typically earlier stage, so kind of the seed, pre-seed, Series A type. The biggest venture investor in our state is Drive Capital. They were two former employees of Sequoia, one of the bigger venture capital firms in the world out of San Francisco. They saw a market opportunity to invest in startups in places like Ohio, the Midwest. Basically, they saw the challenge that if you weren't on the East Coast or West Coast in San Francisco or New York, it was really tough everywhere in between to get venture dollars and get venture investment. So they said, "Hey, like let's tackle this because it's needed, but two, we also think it's a market opportunity because if this is where all the customers are, this is where a bunch of great workers are. These are probably underfunded technology companies." And so a number of years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago at this point, they came to Columbus. And they've really, been an amazing value addition to the Ohio, the Columbus, the Midwest ecosystem, showing that you can build successful venture investments in our state and our region. And so Drive Capital is one of the biggest ones. There's a lot of others that are focused, again, on more some of the earlier stages. So I think in groups like in Cleveland, Jumpstart Ventures, Columbus Rev One Ventures, Cincinnati Tech, or Centrifuge Capital. And there's some others as well. But there's also been a really interesting movement because everyone's trying to unlock more dollars for startups around angel investors. Because in Ohio, there is a lot of industry, a lot of successful people that do have funds, but they don't necessarily have the experience with startups or tech companies because it is a bit of a different investment. And so, as you all know, if you're investing in real estate versus if you're investing in startups, the business case and the investment is just two totally different things. There's a lot more risk with startups, but that's the definition of it. It's a new venture that you're trying off. And so there's a real movement in Ohio to unlock more venture dollars and to get more people into the investing space. Just today, actually, Rev One Ventures in Columbus announced the launch of a new angel fund. It's called 7170 Angels. And so they're working to get more again, angel investors connected with technology companies. So then we can unlock more dollars, especially on the earlier stage. And so if you're an earlier stage company, that's typically where these investments are happening. And then in terms of, kind of relocation, or if you're bringing a company here, really the group that is the go-to, and these folks do an amazing job, is JobsOhio. It's our state's economic development organization. They are a private, not-for-profit organization that works alongside our government. And it was really a new model that about 15 or 20 years ago at this point came to be because Ohio wasn't really competitive and getting new companies here. And some, really thoughtful leaders said, hey, we need to do something a bit different. So they built this new model that could work at the speed of business, work at the speed of companies, and not just work like a government agency, because they knew they had to go out across the world to attract companies. So JobsOhio is really our go-to. It's our front door if you're looking to expand into our state, bring jobs, bring investment, economic development. And so that they're doing incredible work. They're the ones also behind things like these innovation districts, where they're really leading the way, bringing these partnerships together in a meaningful way so that, groups can collaborate beyond just one city. And so they're helping advance that in a big manner. And then depending on which part of the state you're interested in, there's a lot of economic development organizations. So say if you're looking to go to Cleveland, you would talk with a group like Team Neo, which is the JobsOhio regional partner. So basically, JobsOhio is the statewide organization, and then in all the different regions across the state, about probably seven or so, um, maybe one or two less or more, but about seven in each region. You're going to find a group that is that region's expert. And so again, you go to Cleveland, you could work with JobsOhio. You could also work with the regional group in Northeastern Ohio, and making sure that you have a point of entry, someone to contact, someone to work with, as you're thinking about, again, bringing jobs, bringing a company, maybe expanding, if you have an operation outside the states, if you want to build an American operation, an American hub. Those are the types of groups that'll work with you. And then, of course, state government. So we do have like the Ohio Department of Development. That's our state development agency. And so as you see things like the Intels or the Andrels, you're going to see the same names that are leading on these. It's JobsOhio. It's state government through the Ohio Department of Development, and they're the ones really leading the charge for this stuff.
Wow, that's very impressive. That's a lot of work tackling different angles, whether from the venture capitals or the angels and the grants. The support is massive. And let's talk about, what do you think from your own point of view, the biggest misconceptions foreign entrepreneurs have about securing capital in the US, and how can they navigate the system effectively?
Yeah, I would say one of the bigger probably challenges would just be things like venture capital fundraising can be a very kind of a relationship driven process, meaning that there's so many companies out there looking for investment that if you're an investor, you're probably seeing hundreds upon hundreds of deals. And that's just a lot. And you can't necessarily build a relationship with each person looking for a deal. So it becomes a relationship driven process, a referral driven process. Certainly there's lots of stories of people just submitting an idea through a website and getting funded, but just like anything in business, it's relationships with people, and you work with people over time and build relationships with them. And so, if you're new to the States, knowing someone like Paulie that can help make connections is certainly probably one of the big things that, I would recommend, or just figuring out, where you want to go, and then starting to, build and unlock some relationships there. So for instance, again, if you're thinking of coming to Ohio, but you're in the consumer goods space, well, Cincinnati might make a lot of sense based on everything that's happening there. And so it can be, the United States is almost like 50 different countries within it. And so we're just such a big country that you probably need to kind of narrow it down into what specific areas, what specific regions you want to go to, kind of build that business case. I mentioned a company like an Upstart. when they were a startup and they were thinking of where to bring their HQ to, they were doing they did research on, what parts of the country would have the talent, what parts of the country would have access to customers. And then inevitably, Ohio, Columbus becomes on the short list. And, then they're able to make some of those connections. But had they just said, hey, we're going to look at every city in the US, every major city in the US, that's just way too much. And so I think kind of, coming into the conversation, narrowing it down a bit, based on what you're looking to do. That's probably the biggest thing. And then again, finding some of those partners, finding some of those friends that can help, guide you through, make introductions. Just because if you're coming in and you're trying to kind of do it very, kind of out in the cold and you don't know anyone, it can be tough. That's one of the reasons we started our organization, Ohio X, was because people would say, "Hey, I'm in Cleveland," and it can sometimes be really difficult to open up a business opportunity in a different part of the state when it came to technology. And so we wanted to make it easier to connect and promote and advocate for the growth of it. And so I would say the biggest is kind of, find the areas that interest you based on your business case. From there, start to figure out who you need to make connections with and how you can make warm introductions for yourself. But you're going to find a really fantastic community, especially in a place like Ohio. I've heard it said that Ohio is the type of place that you can have a first conversation with anyone. People are willing to take meetings, willing to take calls, learn about new things, new ideas, new people coming here. And then after that, those two people can figure out if it's worth follow-on conversations or if there's a fit from there. But there's Ohio's an incredibly open state. The people are really special, but kind of coming into that conversation knowing, hey, this is what I'm looking for. What are those best places? Because you want to make sure that works for you. And if you're trying to have a conversation with every region of the US or even of Ohio, that can be a lot.
That's perfect. You said Ohio is the state of first conversations. What was the phrase?
Ohio's a state where you can have a first conversation with,
First
just about
conversation.
anyone where,
Yes,
you reach out and say, hey, I'm looking to, connect, or I'm looking to talk, or hey, you get an intro from someone. People are just, really kind and open and friendly. And they want to help each other. There's a real community to our state, and I think our technology community, where, people like helping others. We're a big state, but it's also small in a lot of ways in that there's always kind of 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So if you know a couple people, you can typically get some, good conversations with a lot of others.
that's amazing. That's great to know. Okay, so talking about friendly conversations and everything, how does Ohio's business-friendly regulations make it easier for foreign startups to establish operations compared to other states?
Sure. So I mentioned a few moments ago, but JobsOhio, that is one thing that, is a real best in class, and they've gotten a ton of awards and a ton of recognition. And we'll see headlines where other states are saying, wow, Ohio keeps beating us at this, and they're getting all these companies. And so that's not to be overlooked. And I think you have to start there with it's both the model, but also the people. They have an incredible team that, work hard and hustle and go after these things. There's a lot of famous stories about when Intel was considering where they were going to build their new operations and their new manufacturing hub, that, like a random mayor, small town mayor, called up like Intel's CEO and just said, hey, you got to like put Ohio on the short list. And, once we get on the short list, there's just an incredible work ethic to, get everyone together that needs to be in the conversation to make it happen. So whether it's government, economic development, other business leaders, there's a real collaboration to go after and, win some of these things like an Intel or an Anduril. And we're seeing data centers from companies like Google and Meta and AWS coming to our state. And so it's really a community within the leadership that makes all of this happen. And so Jobs Ohio, just by its nature and the people that make it happen, is really probably the biggest differentiator. And we hear that over and over. Something like Anduril coming to the state. There was a really good interview with their CEO, I think on Bloomberg television when he was talking about this coming here. And he specifically mentioned how Ohio was such an easier state for them to work with as opposed to a state like California, where Ohio actually wanted to welcome them, was excited for them, said, how can we help you? And just making sure that there's a real customer service to kind of the relationship there. And so, Jobs Ohio is a big one. And they're a real entry point for that. And so, they're doing incredible work, and that it really shouldn't be understated. So that's why I keep mentioning it.
That's amazing. Um, can you tell us maybe some of the existing accelerator or incubator programs in Ohio that are relevant for international startups? Maybe they could consider joining.
Hmm. Yeah. And that actually made me think of the previous question, something I neglected to mention, insurance, for instance. That's an industry that, as I was talking about a little bit ago, there's a real incredible insurance ecosystem here, both the legacy companies, but also the insure techs. That's one where, we also hear regularly. Because in the US, you have to kind of, if you're doing insurance, you almost have to have a relationship or get the right sign-offs from all the different insurance agencies in all the different states. But we hear repeatedly that the Ohio Department of Insurance is one of the best, if not the best, to work with. And so, that's another example. But to use insurance, we have seen a lot of insure techs from Israel, for instance. There's some groups that are doing some really great work, and they'll about once a year we'll bring insurance companies from Israel over to Ohio to meet with our businesses and groups like JobsOhio to make sure that there's a relationship and a connection. And so there's some groups again in the insurance industry that are doing this in terms of kind of accelerators, incubators, groups like that. The big ones like the Cleveland Clinic, I mean, they are literally sourcing, companies from across the world. And so some of the big ones, they're already doing this themselves. And so, they're obviously have clinics in different locations, London and Abu Dhabi, and so it's literally a global organization. And then some of our entrepreneurial, they call them entrepreneurial support groups over here. Alloy Growth Lab, for instance, in Cincinnati, they're one. In Dayton, there's the Dayton Entrepreneur Center. Those are really kind of the first stops for kind of smaller companies, startups, younger companies. And so it's the entrepreneurial support groups across our state, which again, there's typically at least one or two in every region. Those are really going to be the go-to in terms of if you're looking to, make connections, if you're looking to participate in their programs, if you're looking to participate in things like accelerators, if you're making a trip over. For the startups, that's really where I would recommend. And again, each city is going to have a bit of their own, flavor to it because it's all local led, and that's something that's special. It's not our job as a statewide organization to kind of be the solution for all these different cities and regions. And so all these cities and regions have something that's, very unique and locally led. And so that's a real, kind of a strength I would say that we have is that we do have that diversity of multiple cities, which means you have a lot of different groups that you can, kind of leverage and get to know.
That's awesome. So let's talk a bit about the talent.
Hmm.
What advantages does Ohio offer in terms of talent availability compared to other major US business hubs?
Yeah, great question. And talent workforce is huge. It's why a lot of these companies are choosing to relocate here. It's why Ohio, I think at a last count, there was over 50 Fortune 1000 businesses in our state. So of the 1,000, largest type of companies in the U.S., market, about 50 or so are in Ohio, which is a lot, especially for kind of our population size compared to, again, the Californias and New Yorks, where, there's a lot of headquartered companies there. But in terms of, our talent and workforce, it's really because of our university system, our community college system. Certainly you may have heard of like the Ohio States of the world, which is our big flagship public institution. But we have a lot of universities, a lot of four-year colleges, a lot of two-year community colleges. that are really good, and they're also attracting a lot of students both from in Ohio and outside of Ohio to go here. And so again, basically any region, you're going to find a large amount of pretty largely sized universities and community colleges. And so a lot of them are STEM grads. So that's the other for tech, certainly, life sciences, healthcare, manufacturing. And so that's something that is quite big. I think I've seen there's about 39,000 annual STEM grads that come out of our universities and colleges. And so we see thousands upon thousands of students. And also there's a lot of international students. I was just at one of our industry events last night, and I met a student from China, who's over here, studying computer science. First time visiting was when he landed to go to school 2 years ago. He's a junior now, and so we see a lot of international students that come and choose to come to our colleges and universities. And we have a lot of talent again in computer science, life sciences, the biologies, chemistries, manufacturing type, engineering type roles. And so there's a lot of talent, but it's also the STEM type that is obviously quite where tech companies are quite interested in that type of talent.
That's great. Let's take some of the questions that we have from the chat. So there's a question someone asking, how can we get opportunities to contribute to the localization of renewable energy, also financing opportunities?
Yeah, so renewable energy, Bright Energy Innovators is one of those statewide organizations that's doing, work in this space. They're probably a recommended go-to. They're one of those entrepreneurial support organizations that does get some state funding. They're doing things in the renewable energy space, and they're based in northeastern Ohio, Warren, Ohio, but they are operating across the state. So that's probably your first entry or open door that you'd look for is with Bright Energy Innovators, based in, Warren, Ohio. And so that's probably my recommendation of the group to go to, at least to start.
That's great. Okay, so we have Tamer is saying, I have a family business in Carolina, sorry. And we launched 4 Wheels in Saudi Arabia to test, validate, and refine our platform before expanding to the US. 4 Wheels, the company is called Wheels. 4 Wheels is a mobility ecosystem that analyzes vehicle health via telematics, links it to centralized auto parts marketplace to prevent breakdowns, and leverages vehicle data for InsurTech solutions to reduce accidents and save lives. What are the best practices for launching in the US, considering our validated business model, industry connections, and North Carolina location?
Yeah, and I'm scanning. Thanks. That was a long one.
Very long
I'm
one.
scanning it too. And so if I'm getting it right, looks like some mobility, telematics, auto parts. So yeah, I mean, as I look at auto, I think distribution, logistics, mobility. There's a lot of work that's happening in Ohio because again of our geography. So all of our big cities are connected by highways and good road systems. So there's a lot of those pieces that are here. If you're doing stuff in the mobility space, I would perhaps look at Drive Ohio, which is a state of Ohio government entity. If you're, again, also in the mobility space, there's a new initiative called the Beta District, which is about mobility and kind of IoT connectivity and the technologies surrounding all of that that's happening in the Columbus area. JobsOhio, again, of course, they're going to have, if you go to their website, and Paulie, I saw you pop in the Bright link, which was really helpful. But the JobsOhio website, if you maybe don't mind putting that in there, because you're going to be able to sort based on which industry and sector you're in. And so if you're in financial services, or if you're in, kind of IT, if you're in advanced manufacturing, if you're in defense, you're going to be able to see a page for that, but you're also going to see who you contact. And thanks for dropping that, Paulie. So that's going to be another one, is like your good entry point, depending on, what you're most looking for. If it's kind of industry, or excuse me, you're looking for expansion kind of opportunities if you're looking for kind of partnerships there. So that's going to be a big one. And so there's a ton in the mobility space in Ohio. Again, Beta District, Drive Ohio, Jobs Ohio from a kind of relocation. And if you're like, hey, we're in North Carolina with their jobs, maybe we're thinking about Ohio. That's probably I would start with the Jobs Ohio.
That's that's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, let's take a few more questions. How does Ohio startup ecosystem compare to major hubs like Silicon Valley or New York? What role do Ohio's innovation centers play in supporting business growth? I think we've already discussed this, but do you have something that you like to emphasize on? But I know we've already talked about this.
Yeah, no, I think we kind of went over, but just real quickly, certainly Silicon Valley is still Silicon Valley. Like we don't doubt that. But I would say again, kind of what we're doing is, a lot of ways, kind of opening up directly to customers because where we are at is where customers are, and that's the biggest thing. And so, you're looking for the best healthcare in the world. I don't think you're going to find, a cluster of amazing healthcare any better than what we have in Ohio. Just the access to the amount of hospital systems, the amount of research, and I think that's the real differentiator. Admittedly, our startup ecosystem is not Silicon Valley because no one else in the world is. They're doing incredible work, but what I would tell to a Silicon Valley-based startup that, hey, if you're building a health tech in San Francisco, you've raised your money. Okay, now you need to find customers. Now you need to find partners. Well, you should be really looking at Ohio because you're going to be able to open up so much more opportunity here in terms of the systems, the healthcare, the doctors, the researchers. So, maybe think about moving here or maybe think about building a second headquarters here.
Awesome. Someone is asking, will Ohio X be in Select USA this year?
No, yeah, that's a bit out of our role of what we do, but I'm sure a lot of our partners and members will be and have been part of that.
Someone is asking, are there any upcoming funding programs or new incentive structures that Ohio is planning to introduce in 2025 and beyond? Is there something in the prepared in the pipeline, something specific for startups or businesses to keep an eye out?
Yeah, so from a state perspective, again, one of the strengths we have is every company has its own unique relationship with our state or with a group like Jobs Ohio or the regional groups. And so I think it's a good thing that it's not necessarily, hey, here is just, and sometimes that does exist, but hey, here's just a one size fits all. So if you reach out to these groups, if you're talking with them, if you have a project that a collaboration makes sense, you're going to get a customized treatment, something, you're going to build a one-on-one relationship that is unique to you and your company, and I think that's a real strength and testament. On kind of the other side, kind of the individual organizations and companies, there's always stuff that's starting up. Paulie's mentioned his deal flows, so that's a good one to kind of, subscribe to. But I just dropped this new angel fund that launched today. And so we're constantly seeing things like this pop up because there is so much momentum happening and there's so many different kind of individual organizations, individual companies that are coming up with their own, distinctive solutions, and that's a really awesome thing. So again, that thing that just launched today, check that out because that's just one option that is out there, and it's just one thing that is newer to our ecosystem, and there's other examples like it. And so, there is a lot going on for sure, but that's why something like that Paulie puts together with his Substack email list. That's a great place to kind of capture everything in one spot because there can be a lot going on, which sometimes can be tough to track if you're not, in it every day. And so, subscribe to that for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, one more question. What type of financial support is available, sorry, for international companies looking to expand into Ohio?
Yeah, that's
Again,
kind of it's a bit of the same answer where, again,
yes.
the Jobs Ohio, the Department of
Yeah.
Development, those are those groups that are really helping, your businesses get, find a foothold here. I'll also mention that team, I think on the Jobs Ohio website, but maybe it's under like Why Ohio. There's also a big international investment page, and so if you haven't clicked around, take a look at that. And they have team members, they have partners that are in, countries across the world. And just because if you don't see your country listed doesn't mean that, they're not looking for good companies, but it goes to show the investment that our state has in making sure that, there's an open door for international companies, international investors.
I think this is awesome. This is amazing. Okay, Chris, let's I'll ask you one last question. Okay. If you were advising an international startup founder today, what key piece of advice would you give them about entering to the US market in general?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest, and we certainly see this post-COVID, but and it can be tough just because depending on where you are at globally and having to travel, but there's nothing that beats an in-person conversation and relationship, and so we see that. And again, our state is almost like a mini world where we have these different cities, these different regions, but just yesterday I was with a handful of people at some of our events and programming, and a few of them were making drives in, and they were making real connections, real relationships in real time with people. And that just, Zooms like this are great because we like to say you can't be in the same room every single day. You can start conversations, but at some point, if you're looking to, in a serious way, get invested in, open up market opportunities, find customers, making trips, I think is huge, or kind of finding strategic partners, collaborators, like a Pauly that can be a bit of a guide to help you through it because otherwise there's just so much going on, for all of us. And so it's a big world. There's a lot of things happening. And so as simple as it is, I would say those in-person relationships are just absolutely vital and key. Whether again you're meeting your partner that's going to be here as a bit of a representative, or you get the opportunity or you have the opportunity to make a trip to Ohio or Silicon Valley or wherever it may be, or London. Those in-person relationships, I think, just accelerate everything else, and we see it in our work every single day.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. I would like to also thank Pauli for, moderating the chat and helping us, supporting all the people who are asking questions and engaging with them. Thanks, Pauli, again for your support. Chris, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Please, if you take into consideration everything that Chris has said, if you believe that you are ready to explore the opportunity of expanding into Ohio, depending on what Chris have said and advised, please reach out to us and we'll make sure to look at the opportunity and connect you with Chris and the right people. And please, if you have any questions also after the webinar, reach out to us. And we look forward to seeing you, Chris, physically on ground someday. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you soon.